learners, welcome to session 4 of Unit 4, Constructed Response Items. In the previous session, we discussed selected response items. In this session 4 of Unit 4, we are looking at constructed response items. I am Munkaila Dasmani, your course instructor. By the end of this session, you should be able to write effectively short answer, fill in the blank assessment items, also write appropriate restricted or short and extended response items. So what are constructed response items? These constructed response items are items that require the student to create or construct a response. They may provide students an opportunity to show their comprehension of learning targets with that answer choices given. Constructed response items can be subdivided into two subcategories. We have restricted response and then extended response. We'll be looking at them. So this constructed response items, unlike the selected response items, you have the opportunity to give out what you've learned, to write something, show what you know. So the restricted, that is the selected one, you have to select from the objective choices or multiple choices, and then you have no option to explain what you understood about that. Just select based on the answer choices given. The test item here may require students to solve problems. Maybe they want you to explain reasoning or explain errors in another student work. Okay, so that is about the constructed response items. First, let's look at restricted response items. A restricted response item is one whose response is limited to a few words. You'll be asked to provide your own answer, but here, a few words which is not extended. So, example may be complete the sentence, mixing word and short response items. You can see for the example 1, the most frequently occurring item in a set of data is called, here just a word, not a sentence. Unlike the selected response where they will give you options like maybe mode, mean, median, and then standard deviation, so that you select one, but here it's not like that. In a sentence, explain what we meant by the statement every number is a device of itself in a sentence. So you shouldn't explain more than 2 sentences or 3 sentences. Okay. An extended response item. So let's see how different is extended response item from the restricted response item. So the extended response item is one whose response requires the student to write a longer response. So the respondent is free to identify and select any information which he or she thinks are pertinent to the item, organize and integrate the ideas into a coherent and logical sequence in response to the item. Extended response items are most appropriate for assessing complex learning outcomes, such as analysis and sentences and evaluation. So that becomes the higher level of the cognitive domain. That cannot be satisfactorily assessed using objective test item. So some questions cannot easily be assessed using the objective item. For instance, if you want to student to state clear distinction between standard deviation and then let's say mean, you can see that selected response items are not appropriate. So you have to explain clear distinction between histogram and pie chart. So you can explain this one. So in mathematics, the standard response items include investigation, which may involve a number of directions. So the item may also be a problem that may be broken down into parts which direct the respondent's line of thinking. So the item may be structured in manageable parts leading to a particular solution. So you may also use a standard response item to examine students' knowledge of teaching mathematics. Okay, so that becomes, if you give a project work to go and explain something, you see it's extended. Students should put in so many things. Okay, let's look at examples of extended response items in mathematics. Describe an activity in which you involve high school students to distinguish between direct variation and indirect variation. you can see the activity that we go through, which will be somehow longer activities, the steps you go through. Then another one, factorize the expression a squared minus b squared, and find the value of that. So you need to know the difference of two squares, and then you can use to apply to solve the other one. Okay, so these are the examples. So the following should be noted in writing extended response items. The first one, test items should require the respondent to show adequate command of essential knowledge of complex learning outcomes. The length of the responses and difficulty level items should be adequate to the maturity level of the respondents. The questions just repeated number I have I and another I. Sorry for that. So the points you should noted when you are writing extended response items. Make sure you go through very well. Then the advantages. They are relatively easier to set the extended response items, unlike the objective test item where you have to select after getting your STEM, after getting your correct response, you have to also look for the distract text too, and then arrange them in hierarchical order and the rest. But here, if you want to describe an activity that leads students to differentiate between direct and indirect variation, you just take and write it down. We are done. Okay. They provide an indication of the respondent's development of higher order processes such as creativity, the power of analysis, the ability to organize and structure argument, and ability to ask questions and develop ideas. So it gives room for students to write a number of items or put in so many things inside. It will help you to know, or it serves as an indication for you to know the student level of that. So in mathematics, a standard response item gives us the opportunity to assess the process as well as the product of the respondent's work. Let's look at the disadvantages. They cover a relatively small area of the content studied, and that is true. Unlike the selected response items, where you can cover a number of items. If it's objective, you can put 50, even sometimes 100 objectives. It means every aspect of the topic or of the syllabus can be covered. But here, because it's a standard response item, you are giving students 2 hours and you want students to answer 10 questions. Just imagine. So very few questions that you can put for student. In that matter, very few area of the syllabus that you can cover. You can bring out. The question can cover very few area of the syllabus. Scoring of responses is quite time consuming. Sometimes the English the student will put in, and then it's difficult to understand and have to read over and over, so I have to go through. Sometimes the question, if it's requires student to solve a certain kind of, because let's say simultaneous equation, people will use so many approaches to do, and then in that instance you should go through all. Sometimes you have to go and do revision, sometimes too you have to take your time to go through the approaches the students use, and that is time consuming. When it involves graph work, you can imagine you have to check all the points, protect points, and then the tables of values and a whole lot. Actually, it's quite time consuming when you are scoring. Scoring may be very subjective, and that is true. Because the same solution student provided, when you give to one teacher, the score the person will get, when you give to another teacher, the score will be different. Just that they will be closer, but they will be not the same. So it's actually subjective. It depends on how the teacher see it. Now, definition of constructed response items, we have covered that already. Then we said that constructed response items can also be divided into 2 subcategories. Don't forget about the restricted response items and then the extended response items. So we've also looked at a clear distinction between the two.